Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. We're back for our fourth season here, joining today with Tyler Coleman, Brian Christiana, and Parker Rose, and in spirit, Ian Kemmerer. We know he's still out there somewhere, and we just hope for the day that he returns to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide podcast. But that being said, we are here with a draft preview. We know that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, you are going to be drafting for your fantasy football season, and the four of us are going to be here and walking through our top 25 overall, top 10 in each position. We're going to take a look at some new players on new teams, some rookies, talk about a little bit of this COVID situation. What are we going to do with our leagues? How are we going to change the rules? And we're also going to, of course, take a look at rookies and our Super Bowl picks. So we're really looking forward here to joining you for our fourth season. And gentlemen, it has been a while since we've been here. Obviously, the world has changed immensely. So we're going to really focus on the football aspect. But how have things been going since our last football season, Tyler? Obviously you've since graduated. What are some other big things on the horizon?
Things are going well so far. Still working over at PCN. Finished up working here at the school with Steve. Got a couple trips we're going on here in the fall. It's kind of hard to manage the world right now with everything that's going on.
And you're still extremely active on Twitter. Latest news, you binge-watched Indiana Jones.
Yes, I did. I actually just watched all 4 of them on Netflix.
And appalled that a 5th might be in the works. Can't they come up with something new?
I was just shocked. Harrison Ford is 78 years old, so I'm not sure, how much acting he's going to be able to do. It just kind of makes me wonder, don't they have any other ideas? They have to keep bringing back a 78-year-old.
The answer is no. This is certainly not a movie podcast, but I got to tell you, some of the joys of my day, Tyler, revolve around reading your tweets and about your displeasure with Braves general management and things along those lines. So heels_r_better on Twitter. Tune in, especially if you're a Braves fan or you have a disdain for the Braves front office. You'll definitely get along with what Tyler talks about. Brian, next up, how is your last, the off season of football? How's it been? You've also graduated here from the college. What have you been up to?
Oh, just loving life every day, and now I'm working here, so everything is great.
And you've got a few jobs on the horizon as well. Certainly, potentially writing for football this year. You and Tyler both are potentially getting into that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my good friend Jeff Warner from the Allentown area has a podcast that is it's focused on the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's looking for some beat writers for the NFL. So Tyler and I reached out to him. We've been friends with Jeff for a little while now, and he has brought us on to the staff.
Awesome. And lastly, we're joined here by Parker Rose. Parker, you are going to be graduating at the end of the year. So by the end of this season, you all are going to have been graduated. So Parker, you're getting ready to do your internship. And so what else has been going on this football off season?
I got offered the senior RA position here at the college. I'm very more involved on the campus. And like you said, I'm getting ready for my internship and just trying to do things smoothly and live life each day.
Oh, well, that's all we can do at this point. Well, gentlemen, we're going to start off before we get into the nuts and bolts of the individual players and the rankings and things like that. We're really going to start talking about the pandemic. Now, we're not a news podcast. We're not going to talk about, the political components of it. What I do want to talk about, though, is how do you envision your leagues changing this year? And if so, if any of the leagues that you are a commissioner, what are some rule changes you're considering for the sort of post-COVID NFL? So I'm going to start off with Tyler. Tyler, what are your thoughts on potential rule changes for this year?
Well, I think you just have to keep track of everybody who is opting out. Now, the good thing is with the NFL, they had a set date of when players were supposed to opt out. So by now we should have an idea of who is going to play and who's not going into the draft. But if for some reason something were to come up, I think set a rule in place where maybe you can drop a player, like say somebody gets sick and they're not going to play, and then you're allowed to pick somebody else up at any point. I mean, that's one thing to think about.
One of the things that I had floated around is, and I am a commissioner in at least one league and potentially a second one, whether we go through with it. I think that's part of a secondary issue is some people are opting out of playing this year because of the uncertainty. In fact, I had a lot of people in my baseball leagues that just refused to do the league. They didn't want to do it with the shortened season. Now, fortunately, I did get a league together of 8 teams through this sprint of a season, which has actually been fun, but it's definitely not what I was expecting. Anyway, coming back to my original point, we expanded to 6 IL spots. So I wonder if one of the things, to your point, Tyler, it could be expanding the number of IR slots, and something that you have to remember, especially if you're using ESPN in terms of the IR slot, is that typically, depending on your settings in the league, you can only use that IR slot if someone is actually on the IR. But then there's also a setting that you can use to allow you to put someone there who is considered or designated out on your IR. So that's a very important setting that you want to look at this year, and maybe potentially adding a new IR slot. Brian, what are some thoughts that you have in terms of how the 2020 season is going to change due to the COVID-19 pandemic in fantasy?
Well, the one thing that's been thrown around is the idea of a shortened season. So, I mean, I just think that you have to consider that. But otherwise, you guys have summed up a lot of what people are thinking. And I'm going to be honest, I really haven't thought much more. I mean, you maybe put more roster spots for, like you said, the injured reserved or whoever, just like how we have in our baseball league.
I guess I really don't know what else there is to do. And, football is the type of sport that I would think that if something would happen on a team, that it would probably infect a large majority of the team. Like, I don't want to speculate that, and I would hope that they're going to do everything they can in their power to avoid that happening. But I guess if nothing else, seeing what happened in baseball in terms of what happens when COVID does get into a team's area, whether that's the clubhouse or what have you, I wonder if that might wake up some of the players to just make sure they're going home to practice. I don't know.
I was going to say the one thing that'll benefit with football is the fact that they only play once a week. So, I mean, like we were talking earlier about Juan Soto with baseball right now. He came back on Wednesday or Thursday. I could not insert him in my league because it was middle of the week already, so we were locked in. And Juan Soto had a great week, batting around 300 or so, and it came back to bite me.
Well, and that's something that you kind of just have to roll the dice on.
You can't. There's nothing you can do about it. But it's just, and again, I think that we, as like reporters, they need to get that out as fast as possible.
Boy, and that's something that I think has really been lacking on from the baseball front. For example, we see that all these Cardinals have tested positive, but have they ever actually come out and said who those players are?
The only one I've heard is Yadier Molina.
Right, and I believe Carlos Martinez is one of those too. And again, we're hoping to keep this evergreen, so by the time you're hearing this, they may have announced that, or it may be obvious. But even with the Marlins situation, they didn't really announce who the players were until the IL moves were made. Once they had to put half their team on the injured list, you kind of had a decent sense of who it was. So I wonder what the protocols are. And the only reason that I bring this up is because there are very, very specific rules in terms of the way that practices lead to injury designations for betting lines.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if they're really going to have to be a little bit more specific in those designations and why people aren't in practice. They just don't want to say the rest or something like that. If it's a COVID situation, I wonder if that's something that's going to be addressed. Parker, what are your thoughts on how this season might differ a little bit than seasons previous?
Well, with your fantasy drafting, I was a little more looking at the end of the rookies. Like, there's people that were looking at rookies probably to draft, but with not really a lot of training camp going on and no preseason, how are we going to have these rookie players and even the vets develop? Like, we have a lot of new veterans on new teams, like Brady's on the Bucks. We got Cam Newton in the Patriots. You could practice with your team all you want, but how are you going to be able to run that offense without the defensive reading plays? So I feel like that this season really got to watch for injuries and some inconsistency.
I think you make a really good point there, too. How are we supposed to really... because fantasy, let's face it, is a game where you do need to see some preseason just to get a sense of who's getting the reps. And I do know that teams over the last couple of years have gone in a different direction in terms of the amount of reps they give their players in the preseason. This is going to be a total crapshoot. So that leads us right into the last thing I'm going to say about the COVID situation is nearly 70 players did opt out. A couple big names. Obviously, to me, in terms of a fantasy game, now there's a lot of people, C.J. Mosley, a lot of big players who did opt out, but the biggest one in fantasy purposes, Tyler, has to be Damian Williams of the Chiefs. What were your thoughts when you heard about this?
I was a little surprised, but then when I read the reason why, he came out and said that his mother has cancer, so he didn't want to, worry about taking that back to her. So it was a little disappointing, especially after watching what he did in the Super Bowl last season. But you know what? I completely understand why, and I don't blame him for it.
Others that might have been on the fantasy radar this year, Marquise Goodwin of the Eagles, Marquise Lee of the Patriots, Alan Hearns, and Albert Wilson from the Dolphins. Now, we're not talking about first-round talents here, but I think that those people may have been on some fantasy rosters, especially in some deeper leagues. Devin Funchess also of the Green Bay Packers, Geronimo Allison of the Lions. But fantasy-wise, that's pretty much it in terms of people who have opted out to this point. Not really major, but I will say that major enough that to keep an eye on and to make sure you cross those people off of your fantasy cheat sheets. All right, gentlemen. Well, we are going to spend the rest of the podcast here trying not to talk about the depressing COVID-19 pandemic and look forward to football. Again, obviously, a lot of people question whether football should be played. That is not what we are here to talk about on this podcast. We are simply here to help you with your drafts. So that's what we aim to do. I think one of the places I want to start is with your top 25 overall. I think, as per, sort of our standard format, I'd like to kind of go with the top 5 from each, and then we'll kind of go from there, maybe then to the top 10 or 15, and then maybe even some surprising people after the top 15 that you had in your top 25. So we're going to go around the table. Let's give our top 5, and we'll start with Tyler.
Okay, so number 1, I have Christian McCaffrey. Number 2, I have Michael Thomas. 3, I have Patrick Mahomes. 4, I have Lamar Jackson. And 5, I have Saquon Barkley.
And Brian.
Mine went McCaffrey at 1. 2, I put Mahomes. 3, Michael Thomas. 4, Barkley, and I put Zeke at 5.
And Parker.
I have Michael Thomas at 1, Christian McCaffrey at 2, Patrick Mahomes at 3, Lamar Jackson at 4, and DeAndre Hopkins at 5.
And I will round out the top 5 with Michael Thomas at number 1, Christian McCaffrey 2, Barkley 3, Hopkins 4, and Edwards-Helaire number 5. And we'll certainly talk about that. I think one of the things that I wanted to say is, so we start off with Tyler, Brian having McCaffrey number 1. Now, look, it's difficult to not put McCaffrey 1. Let's be totally honest here. I think my bigger concern is not necessarily his ability. My concern is still his size. I'm really concerned with his ability to stay healthy throughout this season. So I wonder what your thoughts were. Now, again, there's no reason to believe that he is going to get hurt. He hasn't missed any games. Why are you guys confident in his ability to be able to stay healthy?
Because he got points with who was their quarterback last year. They had Will Greer, right, was one of the names, and Kyle Allen. I mean, if you're still getting 30 points with quarterbacks like that, man, you can do anything pretty much.
Yeah, Teddy Bridgewater, I think, will be able to help him out a little bit more this season.
I think what's interesting about Christian McCaffrey is as we look at his stats from last year, 287 carries for 1387, 15 touchdowns, and really what carries McCaffrey's value in fantasy football. And again, it is important to note here that we are talking PPR. In our league, the leagues that we do, and in ESPN Standard and in many other standard leagues, 1 full point PPR is the way that most people play. I would probably push McCaffrey down in a non-PPR league, but 116 catches for over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns is really what carries a lot of his value here. Interestingly enough, ESPN has his projections for 2020 way down to just over 1,000 yards rushing with 8 touchdowns and just over 700 yards and 3 touchdowns receiving. Why do you think ESPN is so far down on Christian McCaffrey?
ESPN's just a hater. That's how I think of it. But McCaffrey is great just to have on. I would take him no matter what. I mean, it's so difficult. I think this year's going to be so difficult first round wise. You got Thomas high, you got McCaffrey high. There's just a lot of. It's tough.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even from a Chiefs fan, to not have him crack the top 5, I'm really surprised by that. What are your thoughts on the rookie here, Tyler, as a Chiefs fan?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's going to be good. He's going to fit right in with this offense. But the thing is, the Chiefs don't run the ball a lot. So the biggest way that he's going to get involved is in the pass game. And I originally thought that they would run more with Damian Williams and then have Helaire in the pass game. But with Williams opting out, now it'll be interesting to see how many carries Helaire will get. But I'm sure he'll do good. I just don't think his numbers are going to be as high as everybody thinks.
Right now, he's average draft position number 16. But I think that moves up. And again, I don't necessarily, and I'll be totally honest with you, I am not, first of all, based on his 5'7", 207 pounds, I don't see him as being a workhorse back. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't care who you are, there is no one else I would rather have than the running back for the Chiefs. Damian Williams, if it was sort of a timeshare there, I think that could have been an issue. But frankly, they don't have anyone else. They have DeAndre Washington, who I suppose could get some run. And really the rest of these people on this team, I've honestly haven't done anything in the league for years. Darwin Thompson, Darrell Williams, just not much there. I guess Helaire is going to have a significant role in this offense. So keep an eye out for him. Some other surprises here in the top 5. Really not much. I mean, we had some Barkley, we had some Elliott, we had some Hopkins. So top 5 looks pretty standard, I would say. So let's go to the rest of the top 5. Go 6 through 10 here, starting with Tyler.
Number 6, I have Devontae Adams. Number 7, I have Tyreek Hill. Number 8, I have Chris Godwin. Number 9, I have Derrick Henry. And 10, I have Travis Kelce.
Awesome choices. The one question I had, Godwin versus Evans. Obviously, you had Godwin high. Why do you think? Because again, obviously, with Brady and the new look offense, with Gronk and even McCoy, some people want to talk about his potential rise as being a starter here in this offense. Tyler, what is it about Godwin that you put him so much higher than Evans, or where did you have Evans come in on your top 25?
I have Evans actually at, maybe I shouldn't have put him this low, but 21. I don't know. I've always been a fan of Chris Godwin, mostly because he went to Penn State. But I think he and Evans are both going to succeed in this offense. Of course, when you have Brady thrown to you, I mean, who couldn't ask for anything better than that? But really, it's kind of tough to go back and forth because they could both have big seasons.
I think what's interesting here, and I actually have, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, I have Evans 20, Godwin 21, and I'm big fans of both of them. I think the problem here is, number one, Brady downfield really struggled last year. He's more of a short to intermediate passer, and they relied very heavily on their running game and with James White catching balls out of the backfield. Do you think that Brady can throw the ball downfield still, Brian?
Yes. The best. Tom Brady is the best. This is the 4th year I've said this. Tom Brady is the best.
The best for fantasy purposes?
I mean, it's the same. There's a lot of quarterbacks that you're just like on the fence about for fantasy, but I'm taking I would take Tom Brady if I had the opportunity.
Tom Brady's actually ranked higher this year to be drafted than he did last 2 years.
Oh, I believe that because of the people that he has around them, plus with Gronk back. But again, I think the only issue, back to Tyler's original point, with me and Godwin is there's just too many people in that offense between Evans. You still have Cameron Brate. You have Gronk. OJ Howard. I don't know if they're going to run 3 tight ends if one of them gets traded or cut, or if McCoy somehow figures into this offense. I'm just very interested in how there's only so many balls to go around at the end of the day. So I'm curious on how that is going to turn out in Tampa. Brian, rest of your top 10.
All right, so 6, I have Lamar Jackson. 7, I went with Julio Jones. 8, I went Derrick Henry. 9, I went with Travis Kelce. And then 10, I went DeAndre Hopkins.
I think you had some awesome people there. My question here, why Julio Jones over DeAndre Hopkins, especially in an emerging offense in Arizona?
Well, the thing Julio Jones has is consistency, and it doesn't seem like he's on the injured list as much. So Julio Jones, I mean, every year he's always playing good, can't always complain about him. And, I mean, now that Mohamed Sanu's gone, it's down to 2 options. And they also lost Austin Hooper last year, but brought in Hayden Hurst. But I would say now that Hooper's gone, Hayden Hurst is still, in my opinion, like I'm on the fence about him. So that's just, in my opinion, that raises his value.
Julio, 1 year older, also went on a 9-game scoreless streak last season from week 4 through week 15. That concerns me. Now 31 years old, did miss a game last year. Calvin Ridley, another year in the system. 1 more year older for Matt Ryan. Really a bad season for the Falcons. I'm not sure that I totally agree with you there. In fact, I have Julio Jones down at 15, whereas I have DeAndre Hopkins number 4.
All right.
So, but that's what's fun about
Yep,
this.
that's
Just disagreeing with one another on these picks. All right.
Barkley at 6, Derrick Henry at 7, Travis Kelce at 8, George Kittle at 9, and Dalvin Cook at 10.
Yeah, one of the things that I was very surprised about here is, at least for Brian and Tyler, how early you're going with quarterback. This is, I think, year by year, it continues to go up. So because of Mahomes, because of Jackson, and the amazing seasons that really both of them have had over the past 2 years, I think now you're going to see quarterback go up. When is your first quarterback here, Parker?
My first quarterback in my top 25 is 3.
Okay, and I'm sure you have Mahomes.
Yep, and then Lamar Jackson's 4th.
Yeah, so I think you're all going to start seeing that, and mine too. So I went Kamara, who I didn't hear from anyone in the top 10, Zeke, Tyreek Hill, and then I went Mahomes and Jackson. I wonder if, and interestingly enough, and Parker, you said that you'd just done a mock draft earlier today. Quarterbacks still are going pretty low, 5th, 6th round. I'm just kind of surprised by this, because when you have someone like Patrick Mahomes, now obviously Mahomes last year, when you look at his numbers on paper, were a little under what you thought that they would be, but I think people also forget he missed 2 3/4 weeks last year, and still managed to put up significant fantasy games outside of that Week 17 game, that the lackluster effort against the Chargers, which is sort of in a meaningless game. I wonder, when you think about Mahomes and Jackson, do you think it's repeatable, especially for Lamar Jackson this year? Or do you think that, when you think back to some of the rushing quarterbacks, the Vicks of the world, even like Dante Culpepper for a couple of years, do you think that defenses get wise to this?
Eventually, they should.
I think it's easier, in my just honest opinion. I think it's easier for teams to adjust to a quarterback like Lamar Jackson than it would be for Patrick Mahomes. Because, I mean, right now, Lamar Jackson, this is the first year we've seen this. Mahomes has been doing this now for, 2-3 years? So, I mean, he's just getting better and better and better.
Because I'll say with Lamar Jackson last year, in one game against Pittsburgh, because obviously in Week 17 they rested because they made the playoff, Lamar Jackson had 4 picks, and the defense was getting to the pocket and sacking him. He wasn't able to escape T.J. Watt in the Steelers' defense.
Talking about Week 5, where he was 19-28 for 161, did have 3 interceptions, but he also did run for 70 yards in that game. So, I mean, even in a poor showing, he still got you 10 fantasy points. I think what's interesting about Jackson is, last year, honestly, I guess my thing is, I just can't imagine somebody having as good of a season as he had. He was obviously the MVP. But 36 touchdowns, 6 picks. I mean, do you really see him repeating that this year? Over 1,000 yards rushing, 7 rushing touchdowns?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real good stat
36 touchdowns.
Yeah, and I mean, a real tough part is the same thing that we talked about last year on the show was we were questioning if Patrick Mahomes could repeat of what he did. And the thing was, like, Patrick Mahomes, like, he pretty much did, but the year before, those numbers were just, wasn't that the year he had 50 touchdowns or something? Like, those numbers are pretty much, like, impossible to repeat.
Here's the thing. Mahomes can throw the ball long, he can dump it short, he can scramble. A lot of Jackson's touchdown passes were like dump-offs. Like, if you watched, he struggles throwing the ball down the field, which is why he runs a lot. So I think defenses will wise up to him.
And Patrick Mahomes is the complete package.
And that's a good point you made, Tyler, because I think last year the only play I saw a bomb by Jackson was the first game to Marquise Brown when they played the Dolphins, who has no one in their secondary.
Hey, the Dolphins played decent in the second half of the season.
Well, that's because they had Ryan Fitzpatrick as their quarterback.
And who knows
Devontae Parker.
And who knows where they go this year, if they're going to start Tua or if Fitzmagic gets the start. Back to your earlier point. Interestingly enough, I don't even know if you all realize this. Mahomes still had over 4,000 yards last year.
Yep, sounds
and
about
he missed
right.
2.5 games, so he easily could have eclipsed that 597 that he had in 2018. Obviously, the touchdowns way down from 50 to 26. Maybe give him another 6. He still, even at best, probably would have only had 34, 35 touchdowns, which is still terrific. But, I think we all knew all along that it would be very, very, very difficult for Mahomes to eclipse that 50 touchdowns.
And think of it this way. In that year, teams were not adjusted to his way. And now this past year, let's say they got better, but he still dropped that much in the amount of games he played.
Because Mahomes is simply unpredictable. You don't know when he's going to run. You don't know if he's going to scramble. No look passes downfield. You don't know what's to expect from Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely. All right. I think what I want to do is let's go to the next 5, and then after that we're going to talk about just some surprise players because I want to make sure that we get to everything today. All right, Tyler, 11 through 15.
Number 11, I have Austin Eckler. Number 12, I have Zeke. 13, George Kittle. 14, Aaron Jones. And 15, DeAndre Hopkins.
So down on Zeke. I'm really surprised by that. Why outside of your top 10?
He just struggled last year. I remember a couple years ago he had a really big season because he was playing out that contract year and he wanted his money. But it seemed like, and Brian, I know you and I kind of had, side conversations about this, is that his numbers and production really went down.
Well, year over year, one more game and almost, about 80 yards difference between 18 and 19. He played 15 games, 1,434 yards, 6 touchdowns in 18. 19, 16 games, 1,357 yards, 12 touchdowns. So really comparable numbers, about the same yard average. I don't see, obviously we're not talking 2006 Zeke averaging over 5 yards carry and 15 touchdowns, but I don't know if I see that downward trend in the numbers at least.
I mean, he's been going on Twitter saying that he's hungry this year, so if he's going to prove it, it's our time.
I think the biggest issue for me, and I have Elliott at 7, so I'm higher than you even. My biggest concern with Zeke is his lack of passing receptions. Now, I would say that he did catch 54 balls last year, but down 23 from 2018 that he had 77 catches. So he was down in one more game. He was down quite a bit. Thoughts about his involvement in the passing game, Brian, as a Cowboys fan?
Well, as the main Cowboys fan here at Central, but not only Ken, I would say that the big thing compared to last year from years before was the fact that Jason Witten was still there. But again, Jason Witten had a role in the team. And then also Randall Cobb was there. There was actually a third receiver on. So that takes away some of your passes. And now we'll talk about this player down the line, but now replace him with CeeDee Lamb on the third. That's going to take away some passes, and Dak is a player that likes to throw the ball downfield.
I'm just very interested in what they're going to do at running back kind of behind Zeke, too. I mean,
Tony Pollard?
Yeah, I mean...
Tony Pollard played a significant role.
I like Pollard, but I think, honestly, part of the reason that his receptions were down was because Pollard got that third down role.
Pollard got a lot of downs. And again, one thing that you have to consider is Zeke's conditioning last year was not 100%. He came back the week before the season began, and I mean, still played a significant role and he still, if you compare his season to other running backs, he was like the 4th or 5th rated running back Can't complain about that.
No, not at all. I don't think so. I'm actually really surprised that Tyler was so far down on him, honestly.
I think it's the Ohio State thing.
I'm also looking though because I'm gonna back up Tyler with Zeke being down too because Zeke had COVID. He tested positive for COVID, so all those times he's not conditioning and strengthening, he had to recover. So we got to put that into a factor as well.
That's a very interesting point.
On top of there already being no preseason games. and
Exactly.
things like that.
So don't get me wrong, Zeke is still in my top 25, but we got to look at COVID and no preseason. We got to see if he's ready to eat up with that spoon like he always does when he gets a first down.
Brian, 11 through 15.
All right, I have Dalvin at 11. My number 12 might surprise you. I have Mike Evans at 12. 13, Devontae Adams. 4th, Tyreek Hill. And a name no one said yet, 15, Nick Chubb.
You know, let's talk about Nick Chubb. I'll just kind of give you a little spoiler. Not only, this was one of the ones I knew you were going to be surprised by. Not only do I not have him in my top 25, I don't even have him in my top 10 running backs. And this is why. I think that they're going to have an exact 50-50 split between him and Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem Hunt is going to be one of my big sleepers. Now, I don't want to get into the whole sleeper bust thing at this point. We're not even going to talk about that in this podcast. I want to wait, sort of say that until we actually kind of see what's going on with this season because it's really kind of hard. But honestly, if I were to list my number one sleeper, it would be Kareem Hunt. And I actually think I'm going to take him in my first 3 rounds, and I would take him over Chubb. And neither of them are in my top 25. So I like Chubb. I think he's really good, but I also think that Kareem Hunt, this is the last year of his contract. Who knows with the Browns in his 2-year deal? Who knows what they do? I really look for the Browns. I think this is what we call the post-hype sleeper. I think the Browns are the team to watch out for this year, to be perfectly honest with you.
Hey, and just think about Kareem Hunt. You said contract. I think he could go to Parker's team in a year or so. That could be their new running back.
Pittsburgh's we just drafted a running back from Maryland, but we're hurting on running backs.
James Conner, I mean, he's going to have a decent season.
I'm still big on Benny Snell, but Samuels isn't too bad. But James Conner, he needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm actually surprised he didn't opt out because of him having leukemia and all that, him being high risk. But when he drafted, he has heart, and I respect that in the player.
All right, 11 through 15, Parker?
So at 11, I have Mike Evans, Russell Wilson at 12, Zeke at 13, Tyreek Hill at 13, and at 14, and at 15, I put Amari Cooper.
So this is the second one I knew that Brian was going to be kind of surprised. Now, I haven't heard Amari Cooper in your top 15. Where do you have him ranked?
17.
Okay, so you have him coming up. Again, don't have him in my top 25. Don't have him in my top 10 wide receivers, although I'd probably put him in at number 11. I think that Lamb is going to play a huge role on this team.
So excited. Him and Gallup, especially.
And that's part of the reason that I'm a little down. I still think Amari Cooper, I'd be fine with him as my wide receiver 2. Maybe my wide receiver 1 if I waited on wide receivers. Like if I got 2 good running backs, maybe in the 3rd round, I'd be fine with Amari Cooper. But I think between Gallup and Lamb, I think there's going... I hate using the word decoy, but I think a lot of times they're going to try to run the double coverage toward Cooper, and then so I think he's still going to have a strong season.
The one thing you got to think also, Amari Cooper, and as a Cowboys fan, Amari Cooper comes up big when they're at home. On the road, Amari Cooper is, let's be honest, a wide receiver 2. So again, with Dallas having the easiest schedule in the NFL this year,
that's unbelievable.
It could be a big year.
I guess it's easy when you have the Washington football team in your division.
And the Giants.
I'm also going to give, though, Amari Cooper credit, too. Like, when he was in Oakland, he wasn't the best receiver. He was dropping wide open passes and inconsistent. But when he got to Dallas, him and Dak Prescott connected some. Because, like, he bailed Dak out of a lot of situations when Dak was under pressure, Dak on the run, and Amari Cooper was there. So I have to give Amari Cooper credit for 15. Despite I dislike the Cowboys, I got to put Amari Cooper at 15.
Right now, Amari Cooper ADP of 32. So he's
3rd round talent.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
So, but give him $100 million for a 3rd round talent.
You got it for a 3rd round fantasy talent.
Yeah,
that's when I drafted him in the mock draft today.
I think that's fair. All right, to close out mine, I have Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelce. Here's one: Odell Beckham Jr. at 13. Derrick Henry, I have at 14. And again, we were all top 10, top 15-ish on Henry, even coming off that big year. Biggest thing for me as far as Henry, not really involved in the receiving game, though he did at the end of the year get a lot more involved in the receiving game. I wonder if he takes a step up, but I don't think you're going to get much value on Derrick Henry. He's going to go in either the first or very early second.
I think ESPN has him in the top 10. So he's looking like he would come off the board pretty fast.
Because I remember I drafted him last year as a flex or a running back 2 in like the 8th round.
Average draft position at 8.9 right now. So yeah, he's definitely a first round guy.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get him in any league.
Exactly. There might be one or two guys you might find like that this year. Maybe an example, just a quick example, maybe a Raheem Mostert type of guy. But I don't think you're going to see many people like that anymore.
Last at 15 for me, Julio Jones. Again, I'm even higher on Beckham over Jones. So here are 2 reasons why I'm high on Beckham. Number one, I think the Browns are going to be better, at least offensively.
No, but that's gonna help Baker Mayfield.
No, you're exactly right.
He's still an inconsistent quarterback.
Yeah,
I barely rated OBJ in my top 10 of wide receivers. I put Devontae Parker over him.
2 things why I think that the Browns are going to be better. They're going to have a better running game. I really think there's nowhere to go but up for Mayfield. There's nowhere to go but up for Beckham. And I personally feel this is Beckham's last chance. I mean, I know he's under contract, but if he doesn't show up this year, you'd have to think the Browns at least are going to consider trading him or cutting him entirely.
I would say the trade. Trade or cut would be more realistic.
Well, if he has another down year, who's really going to want to trade for him in that contract?
I'm sure Pittsburgh will pick him up.
I could see a spot like Seattle for Odell Beckham Jr. or an option like, I don't know, Houston maybe?
This is terrible. I'll tell you what, please remind me every single show if he does good or bad, because this is one of my people I'm going out on. He only had 2 100-yard
Sounds
catch
about right.
games
And one of them was
year.
against the Jets, right?
Jets week 2, 6 for 161 and a touchdown, and he had 6 for 106. But man, only 3-4 touchdowns last year.
Well, that's why
I'm really going out on a limb here. But I think the Browns offense is going to be a lot better with that full season of Kareem Hunt, another season of Mayfield. I'm not super high on Mayfield, but he was so bad last year. Honestly, I don't think he could be much worse.
I don't think it was Odell Beckham's fault. I think, and a lot of the targets went to Jarvis Landry.
That's what I was ready to say.
Well, Landry's started the season on the injured list and is having, I believe, hip surgery. So who knows? I think that, and again, I'm going out on my limb here. As fantasy commentators, we have to take strong stances. This is going to be one of my strong stances with Odell Beckham. I'm even going to star him on my list. All right.
This is co-host Tyler Coleman. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
So just as we round this out, we might not have a chance to get to all of the individual areas before we move on to some of these other things, because we've been talking for a great deal of time on the top 25. But rapid fire, talk about at least one surprise person that made your top 25, or maybe you're higher on than you think your counterparts, Tyler.
I took Miles Sanders from Philadelphia. I don't know, maybe a lot of people don't see him as a top 25 player, but he had a really good season last year. I think if Carson Wentz can stay healthy, he has a lot more weapons around him. They drafted a lot of speedy wide receivers, so I think that's going to give Miles Sanders a bigger chance to succeed even more this season.
Where do you have Sanders?
Number 19. I
actually have him at 18, and his ADP is 18, so it seems like a lot of people are on board with you. I'm actually thinking that the stats that he has projected on ESPN seem low. I don't really think they have. He seems clearly their number one option. He's a great receiver out of the backfield. I think in terms of upside, he's probably one of the best upside plays, and you'd think the Eagles still should have a decent offense. So I'm on board with you there. Brian, what are your thoughts? Somebody who surprised you in getting in your top 25.
Number 21, Kenyon Drake.
As someone who kind of had an eye on Drake for a while, fantasy-wise, he was just so bad in Miami.
Oh my goodness. Wait till the end of the year when you look at those stats.
When he went to Arizona, I don't recall exactly when he went to Arizona, but I want to say it was over that bye week there in week 8. When you look at what he did the rest of the season, it is impressive. Had 4 games over 18 points. I mean, he is really going to be the lead back. David Johnson no longer a part of the plans in Arizona.
The backup is Harrisburg's own Chase Edmonds.
So and he actually played really well when he had a chance last year too. I'm interested to see what a full year of Kenyon Drake looks like. I think he's going to be one of those people who people either really like or really don't like, but he's going at 19.9 in the ADP for ESPN right now. So very interesting choice there. Parker, thoughts on somebody surprising got into your top 25?
I actually debated between Kyler Murray and Gronk, but I ended up choosing Gronk at 23 only because, one, he's reunited with Tom Brady, and when him and Brady are together, they steal the show. Yes, he hasn't played in a couple seasons, and he's injury prone, but with having Brady as his quarterback and playing a full season, you could see Gronk as a surprise tight end to take. And
if he can stay healthy.
If he could stay healthy.
Miller,
yeah.
you love Gronkowski.
Because you traded for Lamar Jackson to get him, didn't you, last year?
No, I dropped Lamar Jackson to pick him up last year in a season that he didn't even play. But, the thing about Gronk, it's the same thing that we were talking about with Godwin and Evans. Especially if Howard and Brait are still, and I don't want to call him the third tight end. He's probably the first tight end. But I can pretty much guarantee that Gronk's only going to play 25 to 30 snaps a game. Now, are those 25 to 30 snaps in the red zone and he catches 15 touchdowns next year? Yeah. And I would say that's probably the way they're going to go.
Yeah.
But the point is, so then by that rationale, you either have to roll the dice with Evans or Godwin or Gronk. You can't go through and take all of these guys. Like, you can't load up on Bucks, because I don't understand how they're going to spread this ball around. So I like Gronk too. I have Gronk at 24. I actually have him as my tight end 4, but I don't know how strong I would feel about that. I do think Gronk's going to have a decent year, but I don't know how much they're going to use him. Any other thoughts on that, Parker?
No, that's why he was a surprise, because you don't know what condition you're going to have him in. He's coming out of retirement.
At least he's been working out with the WWE.
Yeah, it's a 24/7 champion.
Yeah, it's not like he's going to...
He's not anymore.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going to come back and be out of shape. I'm sure he's going to be in decent shape. And hey, a year off, maybe he feels better.
But like I said, he has Tom Brady as his quarterback, who they had great chemistry in New England. So that's why I also was like, you know what? You kind of can't overlook him.
But you know what? I'm glad Gronk in a way came back, because now we know the answer to the question. Was it Brady that he retired, or did he really want to be done, or was it Bill Belichick? And the way it sounds is that it was Bill Belichick.
I agree. One final person I want to bring up is Joe Mixon. Mixon, it seems like another... So I have Mixon at 22. Mixon's one of those guys that has been... It almost seems like, it's almost like Beckham in a way, that everybody is just waiting on Mixon. Even at the beginning of last year, really, really bad start. Didn't score, only scored over 17 points once up until week 7. However, the last 4 weeks of the season, 146, 136, a 50 against Miami, and then 162 in your, may have helped bring you a fantasy championship, and even ran against Baltimore, who had one of the top run defenses in the league last year, 30 carries, 114 yards in week 10. Now, the only reason I think Mixon could really be something special here is Joe Burrow. I think with Joe Burrow on the team, he's going to have more of an opportunity to get the ball, and they're going to need to have a good run game if they're going to do anything. And Burrow, say what you will, I think this guy is really going to take off right away. So I think Mixon has a good year.
We also Mixon was talking about opting out too because of a contract and sitting out. So we got to be aware that he doesn't do that either. Because like Professor, me, I was high on Joe Mixon the last 2 seasons.
And I haven't been. And again, I think this is a situation where I'm trying to find some people who might have burned people like you, Parker, and maybe kind of get them for a little
I'm just trying to think.
value.
I know we keep pointing to the fact of no preseason games, but how much is Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon going to be on the same page? It might be interesting to watch because it might be a struggle at first, but as the season goes on, it might be an improvement. But I would say definitely the first few weeks to keep an eye on that.
And same with AJ Green. You got AJ Green coming back from a whole season of an injury, and as well as Tyler Boyd and the rest of the Bengals offense. You don't have Eifert no more.
T. Higgins.
I think the Bengals are going to be one of the most underrated teams. And frankly, I think that entire division's got a shot at making the playoffs, to be perfectly honest with you. And honestly, and no disrespect to you, Parker, I think the Steelers find themselves in the basement of that division. They have not really upgraded hardly all. You got Ben another year closer to, being out of the league. Connor, question marks. Who knows about Juju and his health?
I'm a firm believer defense wins games.
Well, you're exactly correct.
Ben says his arm feels better than it ever will. He's ready to go.
Miller, can I throw a name at you quick and just tell me what your thoughts are?
Absolutely.
T.Y. Hilton.
T.Y. is really one of those middle round kind of people. You don't really... He's definitely not even top 50 talent at this point, but if you go running back heavy, I don't mind him as a wide receiver too. But I got to tell you, again, you're really taking a risk here. He hasn't stayed healthy at all. Gosh,
do you think the Phillip Rivers thing will help him?
I do think it's going to help him. I think they don't really have a lot else. They lost Eric Ebron to the Steelers. They don't have a lot else. I think T.Y. could have some okay upside, but I'm not taking him anymore as my maybe second, even third wide receiver.
So like a flats?
Yeah, and he'll probably get some starts on bye weeks and things like that. He is going in about the 6th round, average draft position of 61.6. I think that's about right. I might grab him depending if I'm thin at wide receiver in the 6th round and I went maybe running back. Maybe I took McCaffrey. Maybe I took Mahomes or Jackson early. Maybe I took a tight end early, and I'm looking for a second wide receiver in the 6th round. I might go with a guy like.
So would you take him over a guy going on a new team like Stephon Diggs?
Diggs has been really disappointing. I also don't think that his major downgrade going to Buffalo. Out of Minnesota. Not to say that Josh Allen's not good, and they just really haven't shown that he can get the ball to a receiver. So definitely something that I do want to move in. We'll hold I think we've gotten an opportunity to talk about some of our top QBs and running backs and wide receivers and tight ends. I did want to talk about players on a new team. We've obviously talked about Brady and Gronk. I think we talked about them pretty well. We talked about Hopkins going to Arizona. Just mentioned Diggs there. We briefly mentioned this before, but I did want to talk about it. Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson to the Panthers. Tyler, is Bridgewater a potential quarterback to draft and maybe even start this year? Do you think he's top 12 material?
I mean, it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how the line is going to hold up for him, because I know in the draft Carolina went all defensive players, which wasn't a bad idea, but it's kind of like, okay, where do you leave your offense at now? So I think they'll be somewhat improved having Bridgewater, but I'm not sure how they're going to look in that division, of course, with Tampa Bay and New Orleans. But as of starting him, I mean, I don't think he would be a bad option.
So right now he's going in the 16th round at 168. So it seems like he's back end of starters, probably in that 11, 12, 13 range. So I think that's interesting. I wonder if, because you also have to remember at what he did with the Saints last year. Now, outside of Michael Thomas, and arguably with a better running back, I wonder where we're at with Bridgewater on being a starter. I think that's interesting. Parker, what are your thoughts about Eric Ebron to the Steelers?
I honestly think it's going to be a competitive between him and Vance McDonald, who's going to get the start. I honestly think when it comes down, I think Eric Ebron's a better tight end than Vance McDonald. Like Vance McDonald, he's a better blocking tight end. Eric Ebron will go out for passes. And Big Ben is known for throwing to his tight end. So seeing Eric Ebron there is a good addition to the offense, because we had an offense last year that was really hurting because quarterback injuries. So hopefully with the addition of Eric Ebron, Juju's back healthy and Ben's back healthy, our offense can hopefully get kicked going again.
Keep in mind, Ebron missed the last 5 weeks of the season with Indianapolis last year and only had one game with more than 4 catches. So I wonder, now again, was that partially Jacoby Brissett? Was that maybe he wasn't totally healthy? Who knows? I think Ebron might be now I didn't have him in my top 10 at tight end. But I think he might be sort of, if you wait on tight end till the end, I think Ebron could be a potential steal late in drafts. One more thing to mention on players on new teams, and then I'm going to go to you guys. Brandon Cooks to the Texans. Now, look, I think we can probably all agree Brandon Cooks is probably not even a top 50 player, maybe even top 70 or 80 player at this point. But does it make you wonder what he's going to do with Deshaun Watson? No DeAndre Hopkins. Think of all the targets that are going to be available. Think of what, now, obviously Cooks is no DeAndre Hopkins. They're two different players. But do you think that Cooks sees a significant uptick in not only targets, but in overall counting stats, Brian?
Probably the biggest question mark going into the NFL season might be him. Not going to lie, just an honest take. I don't even know. I don't have an answer for you because I just don't know what his season. I don't want to say he's going to have a great season and then he does the opposite, or I don't want to say he's going to have a bad season and then he does the opposite. I just don't know.
If you had to just take an educated guess, what would you say? Do you think he's going to resurrect his career in Houston, or do you think he's done?
I think he's. I don't think he's done, but I think he's a number, because they expect him to be the number one. He's not a number one. He's a number two.
I think it's 1 and 1A with him and Will Fuller. Okay,
Randall Cobb's there too,
and he's a good 3. Number 1, Fuller can't stay healthy. When he is on the field, he plays excellent, but he can't stay healthy. Cooks has had multiple concussions. I think if he gets one more concussion, he might be out the door. But a lot of people forget Cooks is only 26 years old.
One thing you can't forget about Cooks is that he disappears.
Well, that certainly is true. I mean, gosh, he only had 2 games last year with more than 4 catches. Now, you could certainly argue that the Rams' offense was nowhere near what it was the year before, and I think that we can all agree on that. I'm looking for Cooks. Obviously, you guys, all of you know that I've been a big fan of Cooks, and I certainly hope that he is able to sort of resurrect his career. But, he had 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons up until last year. So I wonder, in a new role with the Texans, I'm interested to see what he comes up with. Gentlemen, any final thoughts about best players on new teams?
I got one for you that nobody mentioned. Emmanuel Sanders going to New Orleans.
I think that could be
another weapon for Breeze.
That's a steal for fantasy, just saying.
And again, they've been looking for a number 2 behind Thomas. I think
Dez was the answer, and obviously didn't happen. But
well, he still wants to play, so you never know. Maybe it could still happen for you yet.
Well, we have CD. Otherwise, I would have said take Dez.
Yeah, I think Emmanuel Sanders is sort of one of those under the radar moves, and I'm interested to see what his ADP is. Because honestly, I think he's one of those people who I don't know that a lot of people are really thinking about at this point. He's going down in about the late 12th round. I mean, he's going pretty late in drafts. So again, tough year last year, but again, is that more from the quarterback's perspective?
Well, yeah, he has a quarterback that can throw him the ball.
Emmanuel Sanders is going to be, like you said, drafted in 12th round. He'll be getting like 4th or 5th round numbers. So.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree. I think that's a great thought there, Tyler. Players on new teams, Brian.
Going to be honest, Emmanuel Sanders was the one I thought of because
Awesome.
I just think he's going to be. I think he's going to get. I mean, he's not going to take Michael Thomas's numbers away from him, but I think that's a good compliment for him, a good player to have.
Absolutely. And Parker.
Emmanuel Sanders.
Wow.
The same.
You 3.
Well, what about Todd Gurley going to Atlanta? If he could stay healthy.
We talked about this. We talked about this on our live show that we put on YouTube the one time between David Johnson, Gurley, and Melvin.
I just don't know what to think about Gurley. Gosh, I wish him the best. I'm not going to be drafting him this year unless it's in like the 8th or 9th round. Or I'm really just desperate to have an RB2. I'm just not a fan of Atlanta.
Can I bring up a name that no one has, I bet, even thought of on a player on a new team? Cam Newton. I think this really could happen. I think this could be great, and I think he can resurrect his career in New England.
Well, certainly, I think if you're New England, you got to be more concerned about the number of players opting out. They had the most in the NFL, including several skilled position players, but it remains to be seen if Newton is healthy. I mean, I would imagine that he would have to be healthy for New England to sign him, but who knows? Well, gentlemen, we didn't get a chance to get to some of the things that we wanted to get to, and I do apologize. Definitely want to take a look at some of the rookies. Certainly, we talked about Edwards-Helaire. We talked about CeeDee Lamb. You also have Jerry Jeudy in Denver and Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis. You also have DeAndre Swift in Detroit and J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore.
I put Justin Jefferson.
And you also have Ruggs for the Raiders, T. Higgins for Cincinnati. We talked about them. Jefferson in Minnesota. So we will talk about some more of those in our September edition. Gentlemen, I definitely do want to come back to that. But I think that we covered the first few rounds very well, and I'm going to make sure that when we come back in our next podcast in September, probably after the first week or two, that we get involved down and dirty into some of these rookies and some of these people who've switched teams. So, but as we do on every single episode, we have to do our predictions for the Super Bowl, and I'm writing them down so we can make sure that we know and we can come back to this. So we're going to start with Parker. Parker, who do you have in the 2021 Super Bowl?
I'm going with a bird Super Bowl, Ravens and Seahawks.
Interesting. I'm still concerned about Lamar Jackson and his efforts in the playoffs, but, I mean, you can't argue. The Ravens were clearly the best team in the AFC last year.
Patrick Mahomes could break the Madden curse, so can Lamar Jackson.
Very true. Parker has the Ravens and Seahawks. Brian.
Kansas City. No-brainer. New Orleans.
Kansas City and the Saints for Brian.
That defense is too strong.
Tyler?
Kansas City and Seattle.
Kansas City and Seattle for Tyler. And I am going with the exact same thing as Brian had. Kansas City and the Saints. I really think that this is Drew Brees' year. I've been going with the Saints the last couple of years, and gosh, you can't find a team that's been jobbed more over the past two seasons than the Saints.
I like your wrestling term there, just saying.
Well, I mean, even last year, when you think about what happened to them in the playoffs against Minnesota and Kirk, it's sad, and they fought back from a 20-10 deficit to tie the game up near the end of regulation, and then only to have their defense let them down in OT. But I really think that with some of the key additions, hopefully Kamara stays healthy all year, hopefully Brees stays healthy all year, I guess with a decent backup in Jameis Winston, and hopefully some upgrades on the defense, I really think it's got to be the Saints. All right, now we got to pick a winner. Parker, between the Ravens and Seahawks, who you got?
AFC loyalty, Ravens.
So Parker will take the Ravens as Super Bowl champions. Brian.
The Fitz is in. Saints win.
Saints. Tyler.
Kansas City.
Of course, we know that the Chiefs fan is taking Kansas City, although for good reason. I mean, I'm with Brian here. I'm going to go with the Saints. Again, on paper, I really do think Kansas City's the better team. I'm just hoping for destiny this year. I really think the Saints are going to turn a corner this year. Yes, are they in a tough division with Tampa? Yeah. And as far as Tampa's the sexy team to pick. They have no defense.
Shaq Barrett?
I mean, yes.
JPP?
I don't think that their defense is capable of stopping the Saints.
I agree. I don't think any defense. I think I don't even know if there is a defense that could. I don't know.
That's another reason why I took the Ravens, because they have a good defense.
Yeah, and I think the
Ravens.
I think the Ravens have a shot. I really do. And I think this is going to be an exciting year. Well, let's hope we have football, gentlemen. Hopefully, this discussion here is going to help you in your drafts, and we will be back with you every month throughout the remainder of the football season for Season 4 of the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. Tyler Coleman, thank you so much for being here today. As always, follow Heels_R_better on Twitter for one of the best follows on all of social media. So, Tyler, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the shout-out, pushing up to 1,500 followers, so we're slowly getting there.
It's amazing. And, of course, Brian Christiana, you're the man, and we appreciate that not only both of you two as near graduates or graduates are joining us on the show so we can at least finish a fourth season of this and hopefully continue going forward.
Yeah, I'm very thankful. I'm just letting you all know I'm pushing towards a solid 80 followers on Twitter. Sorry, Tyler. So But yeah, no, just get ready. You're going to be seeing some content from Tyler and I with NFL articles.
I really look forward to seeing that, guys. And Parker, thank you, and we hope to have you here in future years too, but we're going to get the most of you here while you're on campus for the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
I enjoy being here and enjoy talking fantasy. And for the people out there, I do not have Twitter, so for all the followers, I do not, and you will not see tweets from me.
You can just follow them on TikTok. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide for Tyler Coleman, Brian Christiana, and Parker Rose. This is Paul Miller, and we'll see you in September on the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
You can't forget it's